I'm Amy Baudouin. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Allocadia, and I'm absolutely delighted to have April Dunford with us today. She's an expert on market strategy and everything to do with positioning. During the course of April's career, she has launched or repositioned 16 products and has multiple executive roles in SaaS firms. She's also been part of successful exits, including the purchase of Genesis Systems by Siebel for $1.3 billion US dollars. She is also a renowned author of the best-selling book, which I have here, Obviously Awesome. It's a fabulous book. It's about how to nail product positioning so customers get it, buy it, and love it. And we've actually used your strategy framework here at Allocadia. So it's been tested.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll be digging in today the ways that you can shift your strategies and marketing plans to ensure success and really gain a competitive advantage, particularly in the light of the last few years we've all had and are still continuing to deal with. Allocadia, just a little bit before we get in, I'm just going to explain who Allocadia is. We are actually a brand maker company. We're an award-winning marketing, performance, and management platform, which marketers use to plan strategically, invest with purpose, measure the performance of their activities, and ultimately maximize marketing's impact on the business. Some of our customers include Autodesk, Charles Schwab, Juniper Networks, and Land O'Lakes, and they trust Allocadia to manage over $25 billion of marketing dollars. With our software, they're able to save up to 40% of the time they spend on budgeting and planning, as well as double their pipeline to spend ratio and increase the return on investment. If you're interested in hearing more, we're actually going to show a short demo at the end, and you'll be able to see how our solution works. If you'd like to ask a question today, please do so in the Q&A chat section here, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. All right, let's dive in. The first question I have, April, is really given the fact that we've been just now coming out of the pandemic, what are some of the key market and consumer trends that we're seeing and which has caused really major shifts in many organizations' go-to-market strategies?
Yeah, this pandemic has been weird. I'm sure everybody knows that. But, it used to be, before this pandemic hit, we used to talk about how if you're selling, particularly if you're selling to businesses, we have kind of 2 points of value. We're either helping businesses make money or save money. And that's it. That's kind of all we have. And it's kind of common wisdom that if the economy is good, helping companies make money is always a stronger value proposition than, hey, you're just going to save a couple of bucks. So generally, when we go into a market downturn, what we see is companies shift. So they'll shift from, hey, we're going to try to expand and making money is really our focus, to all of a sudden, we're in cost cutting mode. And so saving money is really important. And so you as a vendor sometimes have to switch your value proposition to switch from making money to saving money and align around that. COVID has been unique, at least in my experience, in how uneven it is across market segments. So what we've got is this mix of some buyer segments are on fire and they're totally in make money mode. And some buyer segments are just the opposite and they're in conserve cash mode. Even now, as we're coming out of this, we're seeing different behavior in different segments. So it's harder than ever to predict what exactly is going on because we're not seeing this macro trend in the way we have in previous economic downturns where it's sort of everybody stopped spending across the board or everybody's spending across the board. Here, you're really going to have to be close to your target market because their behavior might be very different from a market that's right adjacent to them.
Absolutely. Totally makes sense. I know Forrester sort of had a breakdown of the 3 different companies, those that were either just surviving, thriving, or, again, somewhere in the middle. So I 100% agree with what you're saying there. I'd like to open up a poll with everybody and really just find out a little bit more about how the pandemic has impacted your marketing organization. So you'll see a poll question coming up, and it's what has been the biggest challenge coming out of the pandemic in terms of how you operate as a marketing team? Is it more difficult to get alignment across teams quickly? I know, again, we're all remote, so that adds a different challenge. I'm not sure where information is stored or a lack of access to see all plans and budgets. So we'll give a couple minutes and everyone can put their thoughts in there. Oh, so really 50% said more difficult to get alignment across teams quickly. 30% not sure where information is stored. Lack of access to see all plans and budgets is 20%.
It's not surprising, really, right? When we think about everybody going to remote and hybrid, and alignment is really hard to do right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like I know myself, I started remote and, you can't just quickly ask a question because someone's there in the room. You have to, everything's through Slack or some other means. So it takes a little bit longer. All right. The next question really is, what are the best ways to connect your marketing plans with your corporate objectives?
Well, coming back to the results of that poll, I mean, I think this is harder than it's ever been, right? Like simply because things are changing so quickly. So we might have been able to have kind of an interlock on this, maybe once a year, and we're going to say, okay, here's the plan and here's how everything's going to go. And we wouldn't worry about it too much until something, unless something big happened or we got to the next planning cycle. Now we've got this thing where, things can really, really change in the space of a couple of months. And so I think what I'm seeing is companies having more frequent interlocks across the company to make sure that everybody's in line with what the challenges are and what the objectives are right now. So I'll give you an example. Like back when I was a VP marketing inside startups, I would have a cross-functional team, and it would usually be like the executive team, more or less. And we would do an every 6 months meeting on positioning to make sure we were all aligned on that. Okay. But if we were in a situation like we are now, we would shorten that. So it would be every couple of months, we're going to get everybody together and specifically go through what are we seeing on the competitive front? Are things changing? What are we seeing in sales? Are we seeing objections that we didn't see before? Are we seeing a shift in priorities? Are we seeing a shift in what companies are trying to do? And then we would get everybody in alignment on that, and then we'd go. But I think the key is to make sure that there's lots of ways for us to communicate across the company. And we're doing that frequently, at least way more frequently than we were in 2019.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot more war room chats and that kind of thing, especially at the very beginning. I know myself, and I was in a previous company, and we had meetings pretty much every day to figure out how we were going to communicate with customers, which we haven't. It's slowing down. It's not as frequent now, but definitely it's still way more frequent than it ever was before.
Like if what's so interesting about this situation right now is, we had COVID at the beginning, and everybody just assumed that this is like a recession. Everyone's going to stop buying, and we should just immediately go into cost cutting. And 2 months later, it turned out actually that's not universally true. Some things, some places they are, some places they aren't. And then we had to adjust. Now what we've got is a segment of the business coming out of COVID, but then we've got all this supply chain issues. Yeah. And that's holding us back. And that's causing a completely different set of problems. Like we've never seen an economic environment like this before, at least not in my lifetime.
No, absolutely. For sure. Yep. Some packages are fast with Amazon and others aren't.
Right. Some just never show up ever.
Yeah, exactly. 100% agree with you. So realistically, I guess, because of all these changes, and as you say, there's kind of like almost these three kind of buckets happening with respect to how businesses are performing. Either they're going, crazy and doing really well, but may not be able to supply, et cetera. How far do you think that marketers can actually plan ahead today?
I don't think it's very far, to tell you the truth. I never thought yearly was a good way to plan, to be honest with you. And most of the time I was working at tech startups. And so a year seemed like eternity. But I did think there were situations where things were stable enough that you could make a plan for 6 months. And that wasn't unreasonable. Right now, I don't think anybody can predict what the market's going to look like in 6 months from now. So 6 months feels really long to me. Quarterly might be too far too. Yeah. So you don't want to be in constant planning mode, but I do think maybe, quarterly planning might be the right cadence for right now. But again, I think it's going to depend on your business and what you're doing and what does your, what's your market doing right now? If things look stable and good, then maybe you're okay with every 6 months. If things seem like they're jumping around, then maybe you don't want to leave it that long. The key is being able to be really on top of it. That's the key.
Absolutely. Flexibility and, keeping out for market opportunities that you see out there for sure.
That's right. Like we keep talking about agility, right? But never have I seen a need for agility like we have right now, where it's like, again, like if you think back to March 2020, everyone was like, put on the brakes, save all the money, fire all the people, cut back the budgets. And then a month later, half the folks that did that were like, no, the opposite, hire everyone back, expand the budget, go, go, go. And the way things changed between, March, April, May, June 2020. And then we're seeing that again now, where it was like things looked really good for certain segments until they hit this snag of the supply chain stuff. And then it's like, okay, now, some things are good and some things are bad, and we're going to have to adjust to all that stuff. Again, we've never seen a situation like this before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been very unique for sure. So I guess in terms of that, what would be some tips to really ensure that marketers can remain agile?
Yeah, like the thing that I've seen with the companies that I'm working with the last year or two, the ones that were able to respond really quickly were the ones that had really good communication channels to customers. So some companies that I've worked with had customer advisory boards. And let me tell you, a customer advisory board is golden when you're in a situation like this. And I know folks that I work with that essentially called the customer advisory board meeting in the middle of March and said, what's going on? Like, are you guys spending money? Are you cutting things back? What are what's your budget planning looking like? And and they had this immediate feedback from customers, and were able to have that kind of conversation right away because they had a set of customers in an advisory board that had already agreed to be, helpful and useful to the company in an advisory way. For folks that didn't have that, one way to get around it was just being really close to sales and making sure we're really watching what's happening in sales conversations and what's the feedback we're getting. And are we starting to hear things about shifts in budget or shifts in priorities or shifts in what you're doing with the company? So I do know a couple of companies that didn't have customer advisory boards, but they were literally having a meeting with the sales team every single day saying, what are you hearing? What's everyone saying? What's going down? And they're going down and account planning every single account. What's going on here? What's going on there? And those companies, I think, got early warning signs of customers are shifting, priorities are shifting, things are going on. And they were able to respond to that really, really rapidly.
Yes,
So
100%.
Need to have some kind of finger on the pulse of what's going on out in your market when stuff like this is going on.
Yeah, I agree. We actually had a customer, we spoke to a few months ago, one of our customers, actually based in Toronto as well, Point Care. And so they're in the healthcare business. So they were ones that were impacted hugely. And they said they use a little A in agile. And really what they did right away is just make sure that their target messaging was very relevant, and that they had enough of it so that obviously that people, it was elderly people, would be sort of up to speed on what was going on and how they could be supported. But really with that, they saw a double in their engagement results immediately. So, and they really say that that really is one of the big things that helps them to remain agile, is to build out the best and worst case scenarios. So a little bit of this scenario planning could happen. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that even with the pandemic, because again, as you say, nobody knows what's actually going to happen. But we need to sort of plan for the worst and hopefully the best as well. So at the same time.
Yeah. I had a company, there's a company where I actually sit on the board of this company. They're called Sampler. And what they do is digital product sampling. So if you think about, if you ever gone to the grocery store and somebody's giving you a free sample of a granola bar or cereal or something, they do like a digital version of that. So people can sign up for samples. We learn a little bit about them through a questionnaire, and then they get matched with samples they think are a good fit, and they send them to your house. So big brands spend billions of dollars in doing physical sampling in grocery stores, on the corner, on the street corner, things like that. Now imagine COVID hits. It's, March 2020, and nobody's touching anything, right? And so grocery stores immediately quit all sampling programs. Like, we're just not doing that. And so what they saw, surprisingly, was the initial reaction from the brands was, we're just going to stop sampling altogether. Mm-hmm. And so their salespeople were like, sampling budgets are getting cut. Nobody's doing sampling anymore. And so here's Sampler. They're the perfect solution to this. They're essentially contactless product sampling. So at the time, they were really positioned around this idea of digital product sampling, but they kind of really amped up this messaging around it's contactless. We can do the same thing as sampling, except way better. It goes to your house. Nobody has to touch anything. And so they got out in the press talking about how are things, and at that point, the press was crazy trying to write stories about how's the world going to change with COVID. And they were like, well, let me tell you how it's going to change. You're not going to the makeup counter to sample the lipstick anymore, are you? That's never coming back. So, the only way to get a sample out now is we're going to put it in a box. We're going to send it to your house. So they were all over the contactless product sampling, and their business super took off in the middle of that because they did a really good job of understanding what the concern was with the customer, and then really sort of attaching their value to, look, the concern is contact and things like that, but you don't have to do that in order to do a good sampling program. Let me show you how we do it. So, again, I think being able to react to that and then make it relevant for customers in the moment is really important.
100%. Yeah. I think too, we had Unilever was sending out more samples at that time, like we were Tide and everything else. And of course, cleaning samples because going to
it was an amazing time to do sampling because we were in our house doing online grocery shopping, and what all the data was telling us is that people were trying new brands in a way they never had before because things were sold out, or they're looking at things online, and they never considered switching their brand of whatever because they just went to the grocery store and they always bought the same thing. But now they're sitting online ordering it, and so people are really open to trying new things. And so it was a great time to be doing sampling.
For sure. Just thinking, especially around toilet paper, right? You didn't care as long as
toilet paper. I mean, whoever thought we'd spend so much time talking about toilet paper as we have in the last year and a half? Like, it's amazing. We're still talking about it.
It's hilarious. So just switching gears here a bit. So how is it best to sort of align your marketing investments, so your budgets essentially, to your go-to-market strategies as well? Because again, as you said, there's been like channel changes, like routes to market, all that has changed.
Yeah.
So what is really the best way to do that?
Yeah. And I don't know, like, again, I think there's lots of ways to solve that problem. I think the bigger thing I think for marketing teams to really get in front of is, do we actually really understand to a detailed level which customers we're targeting? Because if we don't really understand that, then we don't know what channels we need to hit. And so particularly when things are changing, where it's like, well, we used to sell to everybody, but now, well, we're not going to push too hard on travel and hospitality because that's kind of not doing so well, but we're going to push way harder on tech because that's actually on fire right now. Your routes to market to tech versus travel and hospitality are probably different, but can we really circle in on what's the profile of a customer that's a really good fit for our stuff right now? And then lean back and say, what are the right routes to market that give us our biggest bang for a buck, marketing ROI wise, to get in front of those people and engage with them at the right moment of their buying journey? So in my mind, and this is probably just because I'm the positioning lady, but I think about this a lot, is if we really understand, at this moment, here's the value we can provide. And these are the people that really, really care a lot about that value. We got to figure that out first. Once we've really got our arms around that, then we can say, all right, if these are the folks we're going after, what's the best way to do it? And then let's step back and look at that. But I think a lot of times we'll jump to channel before really thinking about segmentation and targeting. I think we got to get the segmentation and targeting really screwed in, particularly right now, where it's like 6 months ago, who we were targeting looked very different. Now we've got, we've narrowed that down, or we've got really specific. How does that change the way we actually go out to market? I think that's the bigger thing to think about.
Okay, for sure. And then testing, I suppose, as you're going out to make sure.
And then testing, like we're always testing, particularly now we're testing because we don't know what's going on a lot of the time.
We always said test and learn. Now it's, you absolutely have to test and learn. So.
Yeah, we absolutely have to test. We just don't know. Stuff that used to work doesn't work. Stuff that shouldn't work does work. Like it's, again, it never has there been a better time to do testing on stuff.
I agree 100%. So to positioning, I know this is your passionate topic here.
Yeah.
Have you seen a change in the way companies are positioning themselves as a result of the pandemic? And I know I've seen some customers definitely do that, because we're also seeing more mergers and acquisitions happen out there too. So in that case, there's been competitive pressure to change positioning. But how have they changed? And I know this is a multiple question here, and are they changing again now that we have hopefully been past the peak of the pandemic?
Yeah.
So yeah, really about how
so a lot of companies, like my example of Sampler, right, where their target prospects really changed their priorities, like in the span of a week. Like, you know, it was like, we're spending billions of dollars. Okay, now we're not spending anything. And like really understanding what's under that. A lot of the companies that I work with, either their target market was on fire, and so they really wanted to double down on this idea of positioning their value proposition around how are we going to help you grow, because they were selling it. Like I had some companies that were selling in healthcare, some companies that were aiding remote work, things like this that are really on fire. And so those folks went from, you know, things were kind of pucking along to like, oh my gosh, you know, like we can't hire people fast enough. We can't pour gas on this fire fast enough. And so those folks were really tuning the positioning to be really laser focused on how are we going to help you manage all this growth. Then there were other folks where I had a company that I was working with that was mainly targeting hospitality, and that just kind of shut down. And so they had a small sliver of their target market that was tech. And so they made a switch to really, really focus on tech in terms of their growth prospects. But at the same time, they spent a lot of time working on the existing market to make sure that they didn't churn out. So they were doing special pricing offers, allowing people to put their subscriptions on hold, because we all know this stuff is going to come back eventually. We don't want to lose those customers forever, but at the same time, we can't afford to focus on them for growth because they're just not growing. They're not buying anything this year. And so we need to look elsewhere for growth. And so they're tuning the positioning. Like if you go to their website, they don't even look like they serve hospitality yet, because stuff's not back yet, but eventually it's going to reposition back to that. And then some folks, you know, there was a lot of companies that had, just a mix of both. And so they had to sort of make some deliberate choices about where are we going to focus, where are we not going to focus, are we going to tune the positioning. I'd never gotten so many calls about companies that are like, we need to reposition and we need to reposition right now, as I did the summer of 2020, so much. So there's been a lot of folks kind of leaning back and saying, look, how do we really want to tune this stuff? And then fast forward a year, so we get into 2021. And that's been interesting too, because some folks are positioning a little bit back to where they were in 2019, although I wouldn't say fully the same. But again, we're starting to see some segments open up again, like travel and tourism, hospitality stuff is slowly coming back. So some companies are back in that, but again, back in a different way, like where, they're like, okay, we're going to go back after that market, but we know that those folks have changed. Like we know that in certain segments of that market where they never worried too much about profitability, or now they're very worried about profitability because they're coming off a very slow year, for example. And so how can we tune our positioning to match that? And then we've got this supply chain thing all of a sudden. So that's throwing a wrench in things as well, where like if I use Sampler as an example, we're now getting the consumer packaged goods brands are now getting back to a little bit of normal. They're doing a little bit of physical product sampling again, which they didn't do before. But now their issue is, I don't have enough product to actually give out samples. And why am I doing sampling if I don't have enough product to actually fulfill the samples? And so they're shifting their positioning a little bit to focus more on the return on investment, which is one of the things that Sampler does very, very well versus a traditional product sample. If I give you a chocolate bar on the street corner, I don't know if you liked it or you didn't like it, or did you go and buy some later or whatever. I'll look at some vague measurements of sales in the stores around you, and I'll try to infer that, but I don't know for sure. That with Sampler, I can give you a sample, and then I can also get your email address because I'm doing this digitally. I can go and survey you afterwards. I can send you other samples of things that you might like. I can find out what you purchased and what you don't. So your return on investment for that one sample is much, much higher. So if I'm a company that's like, well, I'm dialing back sampling because I don't actually have that much product, then you say, fine, dial it back, but you're still going to do it. And when you do it, you want the biggest bang for your buck in the way you're doing it. So there's this, so that's a shift in positioning a bit from this just, hey, it's contactless product sampling, which is less relevant right now because we're not that worried, although we are still pretty worried about contact, but we're getting less worried about that, but we're very much worried about return on our marketing spend.
Exactly. Yeah, every dollar matters for sure.
Every dollar matters right now.
Well, with that, we're going to open it up to another poll. And this one is really currently, how often do you typically update your marketing positioning? So as April said, she's sort of saying monthly, I believe, or sorry, every 6 months, but is it every 3 months? So weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually are the options here. So I'll give a couple minutes for that. And that's current, not in the past, for sure.
Yeah.
I'll give that a couple minutes.
A few years ago, I worked for IBM and we had every 18 months.
Every 18 months.
It used to drive me crazy. I was like, but yeah, there were a lot of levels of approvals and things.
Oh, I'm sure.
That had to happen.
It would close that poll. So yeah, we got 6% at weekly, 12% monthly, 36% are quarterly, and 45% annually. I'm actually surprised so many are still annually, but would you like to comment on that one, April?
Yeah, like I think you know, for positioning work, I used to like to do a check-in every 6 months. That you know, if there wasn't a lot of stuff going on out in the market, we do a check-in every 6 months, and it didn't necessarily mean that the positioning changed. So we would just get the gang together and check in on it. So we'd be like, all right, has anything changed in our competitive landscape? The things that used to be differentiating for us, are they still differentiating, or are our competitors catching up? Have we released something new that's actually really differentiating and might impact our value? And then we look at the value and say, does this need to change? If it is changing, does that change the customer that we actually are a best fit for? And we'd check in on that about every 6 months. And a lot of times we'd have that meeting and everybody go, competitors the same, differentiators more or less the same, you know, everything's the same. So we don't touch it. And then we'll say, bye, I don't see you again for 6 months, unless something big happens. Right now, I think it's not a bad thing to check in on the positioning every quarter, but I wouldn't expect you to make a giant change in positioning. I would expect maybe a tuning, but not a giant change. I think that the real value of checking in on it more frequently is as an early warning signal that maybe something's changing that we need to keep an eye on. So, you know, it's good to get the sales team together and say, what are you hearing? Are we seeing different competitors than we used to see? What are we seeing now? But I think it would be impossible to actually adjust your positioning every week. Like, I think that would, I don't know how customers would keep up.
Enough
like
time
what you want to do with positioning is you kind of want to pick it and stick it. But if it needs to change, it needs to change. Like one of the examples I used to give, I worked on a product almost 25 years ago, and we thought it was desktop productivity software. We readjusted the positioning because, and we repositioned it as an embeddable database for mobile devices. And this is the early days of everyone having a cell phone and all this stuff. This is really old. And so, and this thing took off after that. It wasn't doing so well beforehand. We repositioned it, it took off. And we got acquired by a big database company in the Valley. And then that database company later on got acquired by SAP. So now this product, it lives on today, 25 years later, as part of SAP. And I looked it up the other day and got on the webpage, and the positioning actually hasn't changed all that much. Like if you look at it, it looks kind of like we adjusted it 25 years ago. We're like, that's kind of amazing, actually. And still exists 25 years later. I have another product that I worked on where it was a database product, and we were very tightly aligned with MySQL, which is an open source database product. And so we had tight alignment with them, and we did some co-selling together. So our positioning was really around them. And that worked really good for 6 months. And then they got acquired by Sun. And then we were like, oh no. So we went back to the drawing board. We adjusted the positioning. And the new positioning was really good. And that worked very well for about, I think it was 7 months, 8 months. And then Sun got acquired by Oracle. And not only did Sun get acquired by Oracle, Sun got acquired by Oracle, and then Oracle made all these negative noises about maybe we'll kill MySQL. I don't know what we're going to do with MySQL. I don't know yet. And then we were like, oh no, this is very bad, and had to adjust the positioning again. So in that one, we did a major adjustment on positioning, I think 3 times in the course of a year and a half, which is unusual. And you don't know what things are going to happen in the market. I do think it would be very hard to make, a series of adjustments, weekly or even monthly. I would say maybe you just haven't got the right positioning. I do think there's value in checking in on it at least every 6 months. And maybe right now you might want to do it quarterly just to make sure that it's there. I wouldn't expect you to do a big change every quarter, but there might just be a slight tuning or adjustment you want to do. And then your marketing plan is going to kind of fold out from that. You can make bigger adjustments on the marketing plan and do those quicker. But I'd be looking at the positioning first.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Are there any ways to measure the strength of a company's positions? Like how can you benchmark to see that you're, kind of in the right direction?
I get this question a lot. I wish there was like a magic number that I could say, you take this, and divide by 3, and that'll give you the magic number. Here's the problem with positioning. If the positioning is good, it's good all the way across your funnel. Like it's, it feels like everything's easy. Stuff that shouldn't work works. It's just good all the way across. If it's bad, it's bad all the way across too. You get the wrong customers coming in the front of the pipeline because they don't really understand what you do.
Yeah.
Or you get the right customers, but they're confused and they're spending a long time in your sales cycle trying to figure out what you are before the light comes on. Sometimes you'll get really good salespeople that can take a bad fit customer all the way through the process. And then they finally get the product and they're like, what? This isn't what I thought it was. And then they churn on you. So it's just bad all the way across. And so there's no one particular metric that you can look at and say, if this number is bad, then we know the positioning is bad. I will say that back when I was a VP marketing, usually I would show up and the CEO would be, okay, chop, chop, let's get some growth happening, April. We want to see that marketing plan. Let's go. We need to see what demand gen looks like. And I would be very cautious about spinning up a bunch of demand gen without making sure the positioning was rock solid first, because otherwise we're kind of wasting our time. So I would usually spend the first couple of weeks hanging out with the sales team if we have salespeople. And so I'd be sitting in on calls. And what you see with weak positioning, you see it really clearly in a sales call. So what you'll get is a customer comes in, sales rep comes in, and sales rep does the customer says, so what are you guys all about? And the sales rep will give the beginning of their pitch, like we're this and we do this and whatever. And then the customer will be like, pitch it to me again. And the rep will go, okay, and then try it a slightly different way. And, and so you'll get that, like just general confusion about like, what is this thing even, so there's that's a clear sign. Just, if you've got happy customers over here, but the prospects can't figure it out, there's something in the middle, not good. One of the things you see, another clear sign of weird positioning is you'll get customers come in and compare you to competitors that you don't compete with. Mm-hmm. So the customers will come in and say, oh yeah, I get it. You're just like Salesforce. And you're like, no, we're nothing like Salesforce. Why do you keep saying that? And they'll say, no, we're not that. We're not a CRM at all. Actually, and then they'll be like, so what are you then? There'll be that. Sometimes you'll get this one where people, and then this one is the worst, where they think they get it and they get what you do. They just don't get why anybody would pay for it. So they'll come in and they'll be like, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. But like, why wouldn't I just do that in Excel? Like I can do that for free. I could do that with an intern. I could just use this kind of half-baked thing in my accounting package to do that. It's fine. Like, why would I ever pay money for what you do? Which means there's just a fundamental lack of understanding about your value. Like, why bother paying any money for this thing? I get what you do. I just don't get the value. Sometimes you'll get, and this one's pretty rare, but sometimes you'll get this skepticism that you are the right people to do it. So the only time I really saw this is when I worked at IBM, and occasionally we try to sell stuff to smaller businesses, and people would go, very nice pitch. Yes, yes, I understand that. But I do not believe that IBM is going to give that to me. Like, so sometimes you get that, like you just lack credibility in the pitch that you've got, or people don't believe that the product does what you say it's going to do. When your positioning is really good, those sales conversations feel really different. So what you've got is really well qualified, good fit prospects coming in that kind of intuitively get your stuff. They go through the sales process really quickly. They rarely ask for a discount. It just kind of clicks. They get it. They often show up in the sales meeting and they're really impatient. Like they show up in the sales meeting, they're like, yeah. Stop pitching me. Just tell me how much it costs. I'm just here to find out the price, buddy. That's it. Like, these are good. And so you'll see that when the positioning's good. If it's not, you really see it in these first sales calls where you can see people trying to maneuver their brains around, like, well, how exactly does this work? So that's usually how I would try to get a feel for it. Unfortunately, you can't really tell by the metrics. Like, even if I was trying to look at, how long does it take to close a deal or things like that, or conversion from MQLs to SQL, I don't really know what it looked like before. There isn't a number that equals good, because there's so many other things that depend on it. Can't really do it with the metrics. When we do repositioning, I will say that let's say we decided the positioning was bad. We would work together as a team, figure out the positioning, and then we would test to see if it works. And so in the same way, we would test it by taking the positioning, building a sales pitch out of it, and we'd test the sales pitch with qualified prospects. Because it's the best way to get a lot of signal from a customer. Like, are the customers getting it? Are they getting confused? Are they getting excited? What people want to do is test it with messaging and build A/B landing pages. And this, but then you're testing a lot more than positioning. You're also testing messaging and page design and layout and your ability to get qualified traffic there. Like, there's too many things going on. Whereas if I build a sales pitch, train a good sales rep, and we go out together and pitch it, I can tell if the customers are going, and they're making this face. They're like this, that sounds awesome. That's a different face. And I can't get that from A/B testing on the landing page, but I can when we're testing it in a pitch. And basically my pass fail on a repositioning is we'll build the new pitch to express the new positioning. We'll try it on a bunch of prospects. We'll tune it as we go along. But when we get to the point where the sales rep says, this is good, I think we're fine here, and I'm not going back to the old pitch, because the sales reps always like better. I like this pitch better, and we'll run with that. Then we know, I would consider the positioning validated at that point, and then we go work on messaging.
April, with that, is there any number of clients or prospects that you would say is sufficient to do that with? Like,
usually we would do this kind of gut feel. Like, we'd want to have more than 7 or 8. Like, usually I'd like to do a dozen if we could get through a dozen, but sometimes we've got if I'm selling really large enterprise deals, getting a dozen prospect calls might take me 6 months, and that's too long. But but I'd like to have a dozen. If I'm doing really large prospect stuff, it might only be 3 or 4, but they're so big and we do so few calls that we can kind of feel it in 3 or 4 calls, whether it works. So we kind of got to gut feel that a little bit, but you do know when it's working. Well, you definitely know when it's not working because of this face, right? The people come with this, like, what, where, why, like, what are you talking about? Back up to this thing, like, when it's not working. When it is working, it just feels like, man, this kind of goes smooth. You can feel if it's working better than the old pitch. Sometimes it needs a tuning, like there's a word in there that throws people off, or you talked about this before this, and that got people confused. So we'll just change the order. But we want to have enough that we know it isn't just a weird one-off, or it's just a couple of customers that were really motivated to buy. So again, I'd like to see a dozen. We don't always get a dozen, but I need at least 3 or 4 to feel like it's working.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. All right, and then can you share an example of a company that has successfully changed their positioning in response, again, to a change in the market? Doesn't have to necessarily be the pandemic. It could be that, again, there's a merger and acquisition with a competitor or something. What was the key to their success?
Yeah, so I have a few examples of that. But probably the best one, this is a really old example, and I mentioned them earlier, this database company that we ended up getting acquired. But we had a product and we thought it was desktop productivity software. It was like a competitor to Excel, but it was like a little database thing. So back in the day, we had Microsoft Access, which was like
Yes.
really easy to use database. You could put stuff in it, you could build apps on top of it. And so we envisioned this thing as just like that, except like a really mature database product, this thing could use structured query language. So you could do, queries like the big databases did. And so we built it so that it was really lightweight, really, 3 clicks to get it installed. And back then installing a database was like, you needed a team of people to do it. And it had to be a big server and all this. You could install this on a crappy little cheap PC, click, 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 get the thing in just like Access, except I could, write SQL queries. We are super, super techie, geeky people. And we were like, the world wants this, clearly. Clearly they want this. And so we envisioned it as like a thing like Excel. We would sell millions of these things for like $99 off the website. So we launched this thing and it was a flop. Like I think we sold 200 copies. Like it just didn't, like techie people thought it was cool, but they did not understand the value of it. Like what was I actually going to do with that?
Mhm.
And so, we understood who the competition was. It was Excel or Access. We understood the differentiated capability. We could do SQL queries. What we didn't understand was the value of that, and who cares? Like, so people, the 200 customers that we did have, they bought it, they messed around with it a little bit, they didn't use it anymore. So I got hired, and one of the first jobs, and I got assigned to this dog of a product. And one of the first jobs I was assigned to do was call these 200 customers and find out what they were doing with it, because we're probably going to end of life it. And so we just want to know, are they going to be really upset when we turn it off and say, yeah, we're not getting any updates on that anymore? And so I spent a month, and all I did was call people, and I'm calling developers. They don't want to talk to me. This is where I really developed my cold calling skills, but I ended up talking to 100.
Okay.
And so out of this 100, and so I'd ask them, like, I'm like, hi, I'm calling from this company. I just want to know what you're doing with this product. And I think I called the first 20 that I managed to get on the phone. They were like, no, we didn't buy that. And I'm like, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. I got it right here on the spreadsheet. Yeah, you did. January 29th says here you bought it. Oh, and then you go, oh yeah, that, yeah. We messed around with it for a week. Yeah, we don't use that. So I was like, okay, nobody's going to be disappointed if we turn this thing off. But then I get call 21. Call 21. I get this guy on the phone, and he's like, that product changed my life. Like, you guys got me a promotion. This thing is amazing. You will pry it from my cold dead fingers. And I'm like, well, that's great. What are you using it for? And he says, okay, we have sales reps on the road, and they all have laptops, but our ordering system is in the office. And so what I did was I wrote a program so that they could actually take orders out in the field. And I did it using your database. And because it's SQL, they can take the order in the field and come back, and it syncs with the Oracle database at headquarters. We could never do that before because all the other things didn't have SQL. Your thing has SQL and it fits on the laptop. And I'm like, that's weird, buddy. That's not what we built that for. But okay. And so, so I don't have the heart to tell them we're going to kill it or whatever, but I got one guy who's going to be sad. And what's crazy is I did these 100 calls, and I got 6 people, and all 6 people that were using the product were using it in that way. Like one of them had these rugged devices for doing field service, and had written a little program to run on those, which would sync with the thing at headquarters, but it was all the same thing. We needed a thing embeddable on a mobile device that could sync with our heavy duty database pack, whatever. So I went back to the team, and I'm junior, right? I went back to the team, and I'm like, good news, bad news, right? Like I called 100 people, and 92 of them will not be sad one bit. You turn that sucker off and nobody's going to be sad. But I've got this little cohort that are going to be very, very sad because they're doing this thing. And so what we decided to do, instead of killing the product, what we decided to do was take a little run at could we reposition it as an embeddable database for mobile devices?
Mhm.
Could we make that work? And that was a huge shift. If you think about it, like, you're not going to sell that thing the same way. I'm not going to sell it self-serve for $100 off the website. I need a salesperson that's going to go out and sell you 100 copies of this thing or 1,000 copies of this thing. So we hired one salesperson. We did an experiment, and it took off. Like, we sold so much stuff. We hired a salesperson, then we hired 2 more, then we hired 3 more. Fast forward a year later, we got acquired by a big database company in the Valley called Sybase. And my boss quit. I became the vice president of marketing over this, and we became like the growth engine for that business for the next 4 years. It was crazy. At its peak, it was doing 700, 600 million revenue a year. And we were this close to turning it off. That was kind of the beginning of me getting my eyes open to, you can have a product that looks like it's just not working, or people just don't love it, but you really haven't figured out what's the value and who cares a lot. And if I can get my head around that, then I can take something that, seems like it doesn't have a lot of value, doesn't have a thing, and then turn it into, a winner.
Absolutely. That's a very cool story. Yeah, thank you. All right, so we're going to open it up to some of the Q&A from the group. So we'll just see what comes out here. Let's wait for the first question. Okay.
Hanging out with sales is more fun than it sounds. I like that comment.
Exactly.
Sales used to hate it when I hung out with them. I would show up and they'd be like, oh, and I'd be like, I'm just here listening on your calls. And they're like, don't say anything. They're worried I'm going to mess up their deal and stuff. But I actually think having good rapport with the sales team is kind of the key to great marketing. Like, if you understand what's really going on in sales, you can, your marketing is much better because of it.
So here's a question here. So April, how long from the time you've changed your position does it typically take, I guess, to sort of resonate into the market?
Yeah, this is a great question. So there's a few things to consider. So one is, a lot of times, like, the execution of positioning is really important. So we have to figure out what it is, and then we really got to nail the execution, and we got to do it super consistently. It's got to be like flipping a switch. It can't be, well, we're going to change the website a little bit, but we're still running these campaigns, and the salespeople are still pitching the old thing. It's got to be like the old positioning's got to die, and you got to flip to the new stuff. And then you got to be super consistent about it for way longer than you think, for it to really stick in the market. So one of the issues I used to have with my marketing teams is we'd switch the positioning and we'd run at it for a couple of quarters. And then my team would get bored of it. They'd be like, this is boring. We've been saying this for 2 quarters. Everybody knows this already. And I'm like, no, they are just starting to figure it out. And so you really got to stick it longer than you think. The other thing I would occasionally get pushback in is people would say, well, look, if we just switch it like this, the existing customers are going to get stressed out because you sold them on a different thing and a different positioning. And then they're going to come and you've changed this thing and they're going to freak out. And my experience with that, having repositioned dozens of products now, is they don't. It's interesting. They actually don't care. They care zero about your repositioning. What they care about is you have to communicate to them that the thing is happening. And they will ask you 2 questions. One, is anything I'm using now going to get turned off, or something you've promised me in the future not going to come because of this? And if you can reassure them that you keep using the product the way you're using it, nothing's going to change, it's fine, then they're happy. Second question they'll give you is like, how does this change the pricing? And if you can grandfather them on pricing, even if the new positioning comes with new pricing, you can say to the existing folks, don't worry, nothing changes for you. It's fine, because they literally never go to your website. They don't go, they don't consume your marketing materials. They literally don't care. So you do this big switch, nobody cares. But then for new customers coming in, you gotta do the switch hard. You can't be halfway about it. And then you gotta stick it. You got to be super consistent, and you just got to say it over and over and over again. And at the moment when you're starting to get sick of it, that's the moment where it's just starting to work. You have to push through that, even though everybody on the marketing team is like, I'm bored of saying this. Can't we just forklift the messaging? And I'm like, no, because it's just starting to work. And as long as it's working, we're not going to mess with it just because we're bored.
Exactly. So it's just getting traction.
Yeah.
How do you see marketing planning changing in the future? That's another question from the audience.
Marketing planning?
Marketing planning changing in the future.
I don't know. You know what? I don't know if this is true or if this is just because, because I'm the positioning lady and this is what I see. But I've never seen, we tend to have a pendulum that swings between companies being really strategic versus companies being really tactically oriented in marketing. And so if I roll it back 5-6 years ago, this is in the peak of everyone talking about growth hacking and things like that. We were really hard on the tactical side. And people often did their marketing planning starting with tactics, like what tactics should we run? And, let's experiment with tactics and do stuff like that. One thing that's happened in COVID is I think it's forced people to really take a step back and think about segmentation, target markets, value propositions. And I've seen the pendulum really swing towards product marketing, where product marketing is a hot role right now. Everybody's trying to hire a product marketer because we're now thinking about these more strategic things. And so I'm seeing a real uptick in people not starting with tactics. They're starting with fundamentals. Who are we going at? Like, what is our differentiator in the market? What is the value of that differentiator? What target segment of customers really cares about that differentiation? Now let's build a marketing plan to go get that.
Right.
And I love that personally, because I think that's how we should be building this stuff. So right now, I feel like everybody's doing it that way. Now, because I'm old, I have seen this happen, and it swings this way, and then a few years later it swings back. So I will not be a bit surprised if 5 years from now we're sitting here and we're talking about growth hacking, except we've called it something else. And we'll all be sitting around saying, should we have a strategy for Facebook, or something like this that's really tactical. But I like right now that I think people are really getting back to the fundamentals of, what's my differentiators? How does that translate to value? Who cares a lot about that value? Once I've got a really tight segmentation, now let's build the tactical plan to go after that.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the questions I had too, and it's funny, I was looking at something the other day and it had, I think IBM was on there, but it was around security, but they were all kind of using the same language. So you almost couldn't tell what was different about each one of these companies because they were the same. So I guess, how do you ensure that your positioning is unique enough?
Sorry, I'm getting an emergency alert on my phone, if you can hear that. How do we know it's unique? Yeah, well, we're in this situation right now where markets have never been this crowded for software. Like it's insane how crowded they are. And so we need to make sure that we really understand how we're different from the other alternatives in the market. And so there's a couple of mistakes I see companies make. So one is they don't actually really know what the alternatives are from the perspective of a customer. So you'll talk to product management in these companies sometimes, and I'll say, well, what are the alternatives to what you do? Like, if companies didn't use you, what would they use? And they'll give me these long lists of like 100 companies. But then when you go talk to sales, you say, who on this list do you ever see? And they say, that one, Oracle, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you know what? You don't have to differentiate against companies that don't land on your customer shortlist. You only have to worry about the ones that your customer shortlist with you. That's it.
Yeah.
And so you might sound the same as, 3 guys in a basement that have never sold anything, and that's okay. Because your customer isn't comparing you to them. You really need to understand what your customer is comparing you to. And so that's generally 2 types of competitors. So one is whoever lands on a short list for whatever reason against you, you got to beat that in order to win a deal. You also have to differentiate against status quo.
Right.
And this is really important if it's B2B, because typically we lose 30 to 40% of our deals to status quo. So if you're not positioned against Excel, but but your customer is using Excel right now. You might want to rethink that.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think people will do this assessment the way we do it internally, or the way maybe an investor would do it. Like, let's look at everybody in the market, and then let's look at how do we stack up against everybody in the market. The reality is you don't have to do that. Like, what you have to do is you got to stack up against whoever your customer puts on a short list. And these are the only ones that matter. If you start seeing three guys in a basement, if they start popping up in deals next year, fine, I can adjust my positioning to worry about them then. But I really have to stay focused on, from a customer's point of view, if I didn't exist, what would they do? And how can I show that I'm different and better than that? And if I can stay focused on that, then I think the messaging that comes out of that is going to sound unique and differentiated. Maybe not from everybody, but it will from the ones that matter. And that's the thing to keep focused on.
100%. Well, thank you again so much today. I appreciate all the wonderful insights that you've shared with us on your years of experience. And, again, I really appreciate you answering our questions as well. And also, lastly, for those who want to stay behind, we do have our own solutions consultant, Jan, and he'll be showing you Allocadia in action. Just a 10-minute demonstration to show you what we do, explaining really how you can streamline your planning and budgeting so you can capitalize on these market opportunities faster, as April talked about, really being able to be agile in the market. So over to Jan. And thanks again, April. Appreciate your time here today. And hopefully I'll meet you at the PMM Summit in May next year.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Amy and April. Hello, everyone. My name is Jan Kublikowski. I'm a solutions consultant with Allocadia. I'm going to take just 10 minutes to give everyone a bit of a cheeky peek into the Allocadia platform. Now, as I fire up screen share, just to set a bit of context, we're really going to try and stick with today's theme of, running a marketing organization in an unpredictable world. I want to show you the impact that Allocadia could potentially have for any business. Really, imagine your marketing org having access to real-time insights around plans, around budgets, forecasts, around money that's been actually spent, around the ROI that your certain marketing activities are actually generating. And imagine all of those insights being surfaced to you in an automated way. What we're looking at on screen right now is a few examples of the out-of-the-box dashboards that Allocadia surfaces for our customers. First one we're looking at here is this idea of a single dashboard, a single place where marketing decision makers can come together to see how marketing is progressing. What is our current budget? What have we got planned? Of our budgets and plans, how much are we actually on track to invest? Right now, I can see that as a business, we are on track to undershoot our budget by $1.9 million based on everything that our marketers are forecasting, based on everything that is a committed or raised as a PO, and everything that has already been spent, recognized as an invoice. I can drill into the various teams within my business to start to see who is not on track. Our Central America team here looking to undershoot their budget grossly. Being able to see which of our teams are actually landing within a low variance to their budget. Imagine being able to track all of this spend in a meaningful way, breaking it down by your various segments or the personas that your marketing teams focus on the various products you sell, and of course, the various marketing activity types that you run. So you have visibility into what is our plan for advertising this year, and what are we actually on track to spend. Imagine dashboards that would give you visibility to drill and enhance to specific types of spend, digital being a great example. All of these insights being surfaced in an automated way, ultimately to help your marketing organization stay agile, make informed decisions around what should we do with our budgets, where should we start funneling dollars based on how those budgets are progressing, and even being able to surface ROI dashboards that bring together the money that you're actually spending in real time. That money's being spent on activities that are bringing campaigns to life. And all of those campaigns and the results data being surfaced to you so you can see of the money we're spending, how much performance, pipeline, or close won revenue are we actually generating? Being able to drill into the various channels that marketing is executing to understand of the money we're spending on webinars, what kind of pipeline are we generating? Being able to drill into specific campaigns or drill into specific channels. ultimately to surface the results of, with the campaigns we have in market right now, how much are we spending and how much are we generating? Those insights allowing marketing decision makers to start being more agile and more responsive as markets change. So how do we get to here? These are just dashboards at the moment. What role does Allocadia actually play within your business to surface these insights? You may have noticed we're looking at a live instance here, a business called Donnybrook Technologies. I'm going to take a few minutes just to show you how they transition from an old world of spreadsheets and disconnected tools that we use to manage plans, budgets, and limited ROI visibility, and how they transitioned into an online solution like Allocadia. So the team at Donnybrook Technologies, a unique marketing organization, just like every single one of our customers, broken down into various functions. Within these functions existed teams. They were split across the globe. There were central functions as well as field marketing functions across those different regions. Marketing itself leveraged a pretty complete tech stack using Workfront for managing projects, a lot of spend going through digital channels, and ultimately Salesforce being used to manage and report on the performance of campaigns. Their marketing org also supported by a finance team who had specific finance technology in place. Coupa to manage purchase orders and that purchase management process, SAP, the financial system of record. Now, once upon a time, this organization looked a little bit like this, where the teams were using spreadsheets, disconnected Excel, unstandardized spreadsheets to manage budgets and plans and trying to track spend. Where Allocadia first steps in is bringing order to this chaos. We want to build out a hierarchy which represents your marketing organization to get teams off of spreadsheets and into what we call online activity plans. Looking at the platform here, this is what Donnybrook's structure looks like within Allocadia. We can see those various functions within the marketing business. Field marketing broken down into regions. Ultimately, every single team that did manage a spreadsheet, no longer in Excel, they are now leveraging online activity plans that live nested within this hierarchy. So these activity plans, we're about to dive in and take a look. What purpose do they actually serve? Well, they become the marketer's new workspace to plan in a standardized way. They allow marketers to capture the important metadata that the business needs to be able to report on. Objectives, segments, target personas, activity types, even things that finance need to be able to report on. Let's capture that important data. These activity plans also allow marketers to track committed and actual spend as it comes in from systems like Coupa and SAP. They also allow marketers to sync with CRM results to bring in ROI performance data. So these marketing activity plans replace spreadsheets and allow teams to come together in an online solution. Let's quickly dive into this North American team activity plan. Here I'm looking at a marketer's new workspace. This is the replacement of Excel. Any budget that I've been given, I have clear line of sight to. What is my budget? What am I working with? I then have a clean workspace to start to build and manage my plans. I'm running events. I'm running certain webinars. The summer campaign, I've put in a placeholder to capture and earmark funds for the future. Whereas this webinar coming up in Q1, I've started to capture the line item expenses that I need to execute. Much as marketers are doing in Excel, except here it is standardized. There is the capability for marketers to capture important metadata in a standardized way around what objective is this webinar? What region is it focusing on? What activity type is it? What persona are we going after? All of these insights captured during the planning process, that is what's starting to surface the ability to run these reports and dashboards in an automated way. As marketers start to execute plans, they can switch views to look at an investment tracking view. Here, I can now see of my plans, i.e. this direct mail campaign around CXO empowerment, I can see what my initial plan was. I now have the capability to also continuously update my forecast. And then I also have visibility into dollars that are committed. This being populated by a purchase management system in an automated fashion, so I can see what money I'm committing via POs, and the actual column being automatically populated by, in this case, SAP, all invoices that have been recognized being reconciled in an automated fashion. Marketers are simply building their plans and managing their forecasts. Any money they're spending is being brought into Allocadia and being reconciled in an automated fashion, thus starting to populate these dashboards that give the business the ability to track budgets and track spend. Within these online workspaces, marketers also have the capability to kickstart workflows, generate a purchase order or a purchase requisition directly from Allocadia, kickstart workflows like creating campaigns in Salesforce or Marketo, any CRM or marketing automation platform. They also allow us to align with your wider tech stack. This campaign that I'm running and planning and budgeting and spending money on, it is associated to this specific Salesforce campaign. Integrations with CRM systems allow our customers to sync their budgeting, planning, and investment tracking tool with the system they use to measure the results of marketing activities. All of that data, Allocadia bringing it together in a meaningful way and surfacing it up within these reports and dashboards that we've looked at today. So to recap, we're helping teams get off of spreadsheets. We're standardizing the way they can actually manage budgets and plans in an online solution. All of this being done in a meaningful way to power the reports and dashboards that any marketing organization needs to make informed decisions and make decisions that allow them to change tactics as things change in an unpredictable world. Hopefully this was a really good, quick insight into the Allocadia platform. I really appreciate everyone listening in.
Well, thank you very much, Jan. We really appreciate it as well. And thanks for those who have stayed on. If you'd like to hear any more, obviously you can sign up for an actual personalized demo online on allocadia.com. We want to wish you a wonderful day. Enjoy our evening. Enjoy the rest of your time. And thanks again for joining. We will send off a recorded version of this session. Take care, everyone.